Right now, the reality is there's a lot of work going on. I noticed there was deregulation in the fiber industry, and everybody and their brothers wanted to put a piece of fiber in the ground. As a matter of fact, my running joke is, if I could rent a backhoe, or I could go rent a boring machine, get some bond, and I could be working tomorrow. No, nobody would know me from Adam, but I got a machine and I got a bond. I know the city of Chicago's a little different where they require different things, but I could really start working right away. So the reality today is anybody that can come out here and work without any training can do it. What are your viewpoints on the reality of what's going on right now?
Well, from the locating standpoint, it's obviously a challenge. The more inexperienced people that are out there digging creates more pressure on us to always be active. The pressure's already there, but as you add more people to the system that are inexperienced in performing the work, that's going to create even more pressure, more recalls, more marks not being maintained properly. So those are some of the challenges with anybody that can get a backhoe going out and calling in a ticket and doing some work.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. Lack of experienced workforce. I think the entire industry is dealing with that right now. You see the aging workforce coming in. You don't see a lot of younger generations that are coming back following that same trend. So you're seeing that inexperience when we are hiring those new people. We're a union contractor. When we typically hire somebody, we're expecting them to be qualified. And what we're realizing is not necessarily so. So when you look at the gas side of the house, when you look at operator qualifications and things like that, we're seeing that trend actually look towards a brighter future. We're seeing more training happening with that younger workforce coming in to backfill from the experienced workforce that's starting to fade out.
I agree as well, and I think we see this even with our large customers. I don't think it's any secret that as a contractor, if we're not getting product in the ground, we're not making any money. So we see a lot of smaller contractors coming up, and the job goes to the lowest bidder, not to the best company who's most qualified for the job. So we have a great safety and quality program, and obviously that costs money. So we might not get that job over someone else who comes in and doesn't want to do things correctly, doesn't have that experience or qualifications to do it.
One thing we've struggled with, and one thing we realized at Q3 was in the damage world, and again, we're a union company, and you'd like to think the people are trained. They're not. A lot of these people that we bring on have never been a union before, were their first job. And what I realized is we sent a bunch of people out, and pretty soon I have a gas service cut with a shovel. The guy that cut it and was digging didn't even know what a gas service looked like. Okay, couldn't tell it from cable TV to telephone to, and then a few other incidents happened. And one thing we realized was, okay, we're going to stop. And instead of taking a one-day orientation and put these people out in the field and dig, we're going to put them through 40 hours. And we're going to take our fusers and we're going to put them through a 2-week class. And then we're going to put them with people in the field that know what they're doing, that have to sign off on them before we let them go on their own. And it was a hard thing for us to do. It was a financial hit to no end. But the reality of it was I couldn't keep hitting the customer that I was working for and come up with anything other than, we made a bad decision today. I'm sorry. And after I went to our customer and said, we made a bad decision about 6 times, I kind of walked away with my tail on my legs and went, okay, we have to train our people better.
That facility owner is going to, they should be mandated to instruct and train and teach anybody that's going to be around the facility itself. But what about the other facilities that are there? And how do we come up with some kind of solution for the entire industry-wide, where all facets of the industry, all utilities, regardless if it's cable TV down to your gas or water, everything in between, the structures change, as you mentioned, Frank. How can we come up with a solution that would satisfy all entities as far as, because if it's the power world is going to handle that facet only. But how can we come up with something for the industry where it's universal?
One of the big obstacles that we deal with from the manufacturer's perspective right now is lack of knowledge of operators, whether it be in the installation side or the actual locating of assets side of folks that are trying to do this, and they really don't have a very good understanding. So I would probably stop short of saying it would be a requirement, but there's no question that we see the importance of having active involvement, because I think it's in everyone's best interest to have that in place.
Look, there's a lot of product in the ground that can cause a lot of damage very quickly. If it's not located properly or not excavated around properly. Don't you think that the industry owes that to the general public? If really safety is our number one goal, protect life and property, to me it seems like a no-brainer, but it could come back a different way. So.
One of the statements is the reality is that one call locate marks are often incorrect. Well, defined often, is often 50% of the time. That sounds not right. Is it 10% of the time? Matter of fact, I would think like if you would go how often a locate is correct, if you're a basketball player, you'd have the highest free throw percentage ever because it's probably right more often than it is not. And the second thing is, I tread carefully here because I know we have a lot of excavators are here and these excavators are not the problem, but 65% of damages are caused by excavators. The reality is how do we educate the excavator that's causing the 65% of damages of stuff that is marked correctly or on time? I mean, yes, locate issues and timeliness and ticket volumes, but if you look at that as a percentage, by and large across the industry, and I know there's even discussion about is the dirt form wrong, even if it's just pointing in the general right direction, if you was going to say dirt shows that 20% of damages are caused by locator, let's double that. Let's say it's 40. It's still the majority of them are caused by excavators. And if we improve the system, are those guys still not going to use it properly? So we've improved the system, and the guys that are doing it right are going to continue to do it right, but the guys that are doing it wrong are going to continue to do it wrong.
And sticking with his theme of perception, it was actually one of the roundtables that I sat on earlier, and somebody at the table made the comment that all it takes is one bad contractor to make the good contractors look bad. And that's something that we deal with regularly, whether it's with a customer or a municipality or a utility owner, or even residents of a neighborhood that we're coming through. If we're coming through that neighborhood and there's, and they're just coming off of having their water service out because a bad contractor came through without locates, hit their water service, they're gonna have this perception with us that we're just another contractor. They're just waiting for something to happen. So yeah, it's training. How do we regulate who can buy a bore rig, who can get a contract, whether it's the owners that are putting out the contracts, should they qualify the contractors? Some organizations, some agencies do qualify. You have to be qualified to bid their jobs. Maybe we need to look at that a little bit more as far as a qualification process.
And just jumping onto the bid process like you talked about, there are certain set qualifications that you have to have from the contractor to the utility. But we talked about it earlier with the subcontractor process, where I think a lot of the contractors are then just subbing that work back out to, again, lowest bid, not vetting those subcontractors through that same process. So it's really creating a subcontractor process that holds that subcontractor to the same standards that you're held at from the initial bid from the utility.
It's not hard. It's capital intensive. And you hinted at that a little bit. Like larger companies who are more established have the capital and the resources. So when you first start the culture shift, if you start here and the end culture product in terms of damage prevention is here, this gap here is very expensive. Like when you get here, you can make money because you're moving.
There you go.
This gap is expensive. So how do you get guys from there to there? Because that culture shift there's a lot of pain in there.
And that's the thing. And what causes a person to see that I've got to get here? It's usually one costly damage, right? Somebody getting hurt.
Or customers forcing you to be there.
Right.
It's depending on what industry you're in. So our oil and gas division, our customers, and our electric division, customers have to be there. Right. We have a telecom division where we're there, but our customers aren't really saying you have to be there on the telecom side.
So, and to have just a plug-and-play system, you were talking about, it's very easy to do it. Any of us that are in the industry can step back and
It's not complex. It's not rocket science.
But those guys are concentrating on making the dollar to get that pipe in the ground, that sewer in the ground, or whatever it is. That's where they make their money.
Sure.
And they're focused on just that aspect of it. But when they can take that second to step back and realize, I need to do this, this, and this, usually backing up with the data of, this is the damage that you cost, and this is how much it costs to repair the damage. But that's just a small portion. Now you have your loaded labor rates on your guys, your equipment. let's figure this in. And now all of a sudden that number's like, whoa, we were only down for an hour or 2 hours, whatever, wait for that damage repair. It's exponential now.
Yeah.
So I think that that's one of the benefits of it, is making sure that you do understand that stuff. And I don't want it ever to be just a canned program. I don't want to see it as like check the box.
It has to be a cultural thing within your company.
Just curious, kind of, give you an example. Up in Ontario, Enbridge Gas has taken a step of either pulling out any pipe that needs to be removed that they've abandoned or decommissioning that pipe. Curious, I've brought this up in many times before, but curious how many times you're coming across abandoned pipe, idle pipe. The gas utility may want to come back and reuse that pipe at a later date. So there's a lot of variables out there, but how are you guys dealing with abandoned or idle pipe out there throughout the United States?
A lot of waiting. A lot of waiting. We do a lot of work along the railroad. So there's a lot of abandoned utilities, pipes, cables, wires down, and you have to wait.
And are the utilities involved in those occasions and coming out to help or assist, or is it primarily relying on?
Oh, we have to call in. We have to call it in. We don't know. We might not know that it's abandoned, so we're calling it in as a utility hit. So we have to wait. That's why I said a lot of waiting. We have to wait for all the utility companies to come out and say it's not theirs. And then depending on the utility, if it's a gas, prove that it's abandoned for me, please. Drill it.
So should we be more proactive in dealing with abandoned pipe throughout the United States? Should there be a process for dealing with that versus waiting? Because there's a lot of cost that comes with
There's
that.
a lot of cost. A lot of cost in it.
But yes, the answer is yes, but how do we do that?
I'll put on my telecom hat. There's an old saying in the telecom industry that there's more abandoned facilities in the ground than there are working. And I know for a fact before I left the company I was working for there, part of their engineering mission was to abandon that and mark it as abandoned on their utility records, both at the one call and internally in-house there, just for that reason, to assist the contractors out there. So like I said, if it's not located and something pops up, you come out, hey, we know there's an abandoned facilities here. Thank you for calling us. We verify that one is non-active. Tear it out.
Well, and I think one thing that we struggled with was, number one, to get our older workforce that had been installing for 25 years. They find something that's not marked, and in their eyes, for years, they just cut it, right? So it was our challenge to go, okay, everybody stop. Number one, let's make the right phone calls. The second challenge we're running into with all the overlay fiber lines that are not specific to that company that's basically the majority of the Twin Cities, we run into fiber line steady and nobody claims them. We lose hours and hours of downtime. We call everybody on the ticket. Nobody claims it's their line. So then we're at a standstill and somebody makes a decision. Do we continue to dig or what else do we do? Because we literally hit the end where we have no other utilities to call, but somebody owns that line.
Well, in Pennsylvania, our only remedy when we go into a development knowing or finding out within the first 2 days of digging that there's a lot of abandoned lines, you make the call and you have a meeting. But our law provides us with going back to the project owner and say, listen, we need to address all these abandoned lines. We're putting you on notice that you're going to have to pay us to go ahead, and it puts us in a bad spot because we're working for them. But if it comes to the point where you're managing the risk, you're losing too much money, you got to say, hey, this neighborhood's messed up and they don't know where everything is. What do you want to do? So we try to make it where all the shareholders are involved. When I first started this 40 years ago, it was just us and utilities, just button heads. So we've made strides to bring in designers and project owners to realize that they have a responsibility too in this. Ultimately, in Pennsylvania, we're trying to push for standby time where an excavator can stop his operations and boom. Whether the owner goes after the utility, throws some money out there, but you can't leave it all on us. We're the lowest responsible bidder, do all public work. Standby time we're trying to push legislatively. We thought we were close, it got shut down. Utilities are pretty adamant about not paying for any downtime. So.
You had mentioned, when you come across an abandoned facility, treating it as an emergency situation. Is that, it doesn't sound like Pennsylvania, that's the situation, or is there a 3-hour, 4-hour response
We're required to call 911. We get the fire trucks,
But a response from the owner or the utility.
It can go either way, you know, it put
Yeah.
you in a bad spot with them and tell you to deal with it. Some of them are better than others.
Well, I guess I would still argue that point is that all the data that we have, I know we've had discussions, is the data correct, but the majority of damages come from excavators that excavate when something is located correctly. So it's not that they excavated and yes, we've already accounted for that, the majority percentage of that. So if you're gonna look at something like, hey, where we're gonna have the biggest impact on, let's figure out how we get that better. And we can talk about, yes, it's always a great idea to improve your location methods, whether it's through GIS and how we get there. That's all, those are all good discussions. But the reality is you're missing the bigger piece on what is actually causing this, where are all these coming from, and whether it's coming from a utility, whether it's even coming from the excavators in the dirt form, it's all pointing toward the same direction. It's like, hey, we have to get better with excavators.
I'd like to sit up here and say Q3 is the best company there is. We never hit anything. The reality of it is, my damages are a lot of them my own fault, my own employees. We've dug something up, we've spotted it, we decided to dig with the backhoe, and the guys made assumptions, dirt fell back in the hole, well, we saw it once, and they cut it, right? That's my part that we have to do better. I know we have that problem, so I agree with you. Some of the heartache damages that I have this year, we caused ourselves, right? And that's me training, and it's our team training our people the right way. So I can eliminate part of that. That's what I can do on my side. Now, granted, we, especially this year, we had trouble with locates and we cut, cable TV drops that are an inch underneath the sod because the guy puts a shovel in the ground, right? And they're unmarked. And we always have those, but a lot of the ones I can control myself, and that's us training better and getting our people better trained how to dig properly. And we use hydrovac system 50% more than we did last year. We took a huge step and we use that more than we ever have in the past.
Speaking from the manufacturing side, you've seen a market there that's more than doubled in 4 years' time. And it's definitely being accepted as the preferred method and sometimes the only method to put pipe in the ground.
Yeah.
And to keep it safe, keep your guys safe out there. Because when it all boils down to it, how many times you've been out there and you do a locate with a vacuum excavator and you find lines that, whether they're abandoned or not, that you find lines that weren't marked.
Yep.
And the only other way you find them is, unfortunately, with that backup.
Okay, here we got, downtown Milwaukee. We want to put 5G in there, and we're going to do all this. The sites are going to be located all around a, kind of a 2 mile square in the area. Can we do an assessment of that area right there and say, what's the best way and who's the best operators I can put in downtown Milwaukee to put this stuff in for the, national convention?
Yeah, I guess we deal with that because we have work in downtown Chicago. We have work in cornfields and, low populated areas. So certain areas, so like that, if you're downtown Chicago or downtown anywhere where there's highly populated traffic, more utilities than usual, you go to your vac excavation more than just digging with a machine because it's a lot easier, it's safer, it's more efficient in those areas. So where if you're out in the cornfield, there's not as many people, traffic, there's not really lane closures, so you could dig easier with a backhoe or an excavator than you would be able to in a highly populated city. So I guess, we do kind of assess that on a daily basis. We deal with that. So I guess we already that's part of our program, our culture already.
I think that's another big challenge for some of the smaller companies that maybe are a subcontractor of a larger company, where you have the resources as a big company to send people out there and spend a lot of time on that job site before you send a crew out there, right? You're checking it, you're identifying hazards, you're doing a walk down. We have crews that go out and pre-mark and then go back and check the marks, and then they identify we have a checklist that we use already that identifies any abnormal conditions in that area before we ever send a crew out there. So that's just taking it a step further, but for a smaller company, they may not have the resources to be able to do that, so it'd be more difficult for them, obviously.